I'm Dr. Scott Lyons, and you're watching or listening to The Gently Used Human. In today's world, trauma has become a buzzword. But what does it truly mean to experience and heal from it? And how do we navigate the complex journey of understanding our deepest wounds and finding a path to genuine recovery? And what if the key to breaking free of destructive patterns lies in understanding and appreciating the protective parts of ourselves? Well, today I'm joined by Dr. Frank Anderson, a world-renowned trauma expert, psychiatrist, and author of the memoir, To Be Loved, a story of truth, trauma, and transformation. Frank's journey from enduring childhood trauma to becoming a leading voice in trauma healing is nothing short of inspiring. In this conversation, we'll explore how slowing down and being present with our emotions can lead to genuine healing, and how the next generation of trauma recovery will need to move beyond traditional therapy to include a collaborative and holistic approach. We'll discuss the repetitive patterns in relationships, that we all know, that stem from unresolved relational wounds, and the critical inner work required to break free from these cycles, shedding light on how releasing anger and resentment can lead to self-compassion and personal growth. Join us as we delve into the transformative power of understanding ourselves and the journey towards true healing. Let's get this started. Frank, welcome to The Gently Used Human. It's such a blessing to have you. I'm so good to hang out with you.
That's great. It's lovely to be here. I love your energy already. I feel like this is going to be a really fun conversation. So thank you for having me.
My pleasure. Frank, I think you're known as the darling child of the therapy world. You know that about yourself, right?
No! What the hell are you talking about? The darling child? Come on!
You are the darling child of the therapy. If I mention your name to any of my friends, they're like, oh my God, I love Frank. Oh my God, Frank is the best. Oh my God. And like anything else that we're talking about gets dropped to talk about how they love you.
Well, that's wonderful to hear. And people don't tell me that directly, right? So It's lovely to hear that that's the reputation, because we know it can change on a dime, right?
It certainly can. Although I think you've built up enough darling credits that you can fuck up in the world and still be okay.
Good to hear. That's great. That's great. I do like sending love and compassion to the world. I feel it's super important. So if it's being received, I'm doing my job.
I think it is. I mean, transparently speaking, because there's quite a few of us who've written books and we do a lot of public speaking and television, and behind the stage is like we don't walk the walk.
Yes.
Or walk the talk, or whatever the phrase is. It's not embodied.
Yep.
And
100%.
So I mean, time will tell as I continue to get to know you, but so far, your reputation precedes you of like, you are just like a ray of sunshine, and like you've done the work and you exist in the world that way, and you're still a human. Yeah.
It's not, it is a bit surprising to me. I mean, I hear the reputation of people in Hollywood, and I come from the Harvard ivory tower world, which is super pretentious, right? And I'm in that world, and now I'm in this Hollywood world, but I feel like I'm kind of a crossover person. Like I'm also a regular person too, and so I feel like I'm a good teacher to bridge those worlds. Is what I'm hoping to be able to accomplish in that way, so that I can, this is part of, honestly, the whole idea of writing a memoir. Like, what trauma expert writes a very revealing book about all the horrible things that happened to him and he's done, in the world? And I was like, that's my role here. I want to get rid of the divide, that us and them divide that exists so profoundly in many circles.
See, this is why people just fall in love with you, Frank. You're charming as fuck. You're like here for the transparency of it all. And you just, So I'd love to dive into that, because like, you're so cute. All right. It's hard. I get what people are saying. It's hard to like, you're just adorable. You're so sweet. This is clearly your trauma survival skills, and they are working for you.
Mm. No, it's
No,
not.
I'm just kidding.
I'll tell you, no, but I'm glad you say that. My trauma survival skills
Yeah.
were super smart and
Mm.
pleasing everyone. Those were my
Wow.
trauma skills. Okay.
Yeah.
Smart,
Yeah.
smart, 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 smart. I thought that's who I was. Right.
Mm.
And, like, please, please, please have no needs, have no needs. Like, please everybody else and have no needs. So honestly, a big chunk of my life, that's the way I lived. So it was this superficial, not
Ah.
authentic me in the
Yeah.
world. And so honestly, it's more recently, as the more healing I've done, the more it's like, oh, I can actually show up as me in an
Mm.
authentic way that doesn't have any of the pretense, that I can be authentic in myself, regardless of who you are, because I'm more
Yeah.
comfortable in my own skin now. So
Yeah.
I'm more me than I've ever been before because
Mm.
of the work I've done.
As you were kind of derobing those
Yeah.
layers of survival strategy,
Yeah.
were you at all like curious, like, who will I be? Like, was that a question that was part of the
It,
process?
it, it was more like this. I remember this moment. I was like, oh my God, you're not just smart. Like, it was
Mm.
like, that was who I was. Right.
Yeah.
And it was a little bit like an identity crisis. Like,
Mm-hmm.
holy shit, now what? Like, I
Mm.
have no idea who I am outside of smart. Right.
Wow.
Somebody said to me, like, you're so funny. I'm like, I am. I had no idea. Like, really? Like, because I
Yeah.
was everything was intellect, smart, 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 get
Yeah.
A's, achieve, achieve, achieve,
Yeah.
to be loved, like the whole point of my whole life, right? So it was a little bit like an identity crisis, like, who am I going to be now? Because I was so attached to that identity as who I
Mm.
am. So it was this interesting thing to learn these different facets of myself, including humor.
Mm.
And more recently,
Yeah.
like, powerful. Like, I
Wow.
never saw myself as a powerful person at
Mm.
all, And so, like, oh, you can be powerful. Like, it's okay,
Mm.
So it's interesting to learn these new facets
Yeah.
of myself, the more I become really me.
Mm. Was intelligence like the currency of love in your family growing up?
Well, that's what I thought.
Isn't that interesting? What we think is the currency of love, it might
Right.
not
That's
be the
what
currency
I
of love.
thought. I remember
Mm.
and I talk about this in the book, like,
Yeah.
early on, my parents had this rule, like, you get back in the day, like, we'll talk about my age soon enough because I'm really old and I don't look really old, right? So
The camera filters are phenomenal. Whatever you're using, I want 10 of those.
people are like, Frank, you should do a skincare line. I'm 60. I'm 60 years old.
No.
Yes, I am 60 years old. Nobody knows I'm 60. I think it's because all the healing that I've done, honestly, right? But
How
I
do you
really,
bottle that?
somebody was like, I did a podcast with somebody the other day,
Yeah.
and they're like, don't buy Botox, buy Frank's book.
Oh,
It was pretty funny.
that's a great
Isn't it
promo.
great? I kind of thought, but I believe that. I kind of feel like I get younger the more layers I release. I kind of feel like it's my energy. My husband will say, oh, you and your Italians with your damn skin. So he thinks there's a genetic component to it, right? But my point was, like, back in the day when I was a little kid in school, my parents gave us $1 for every A. Like, it was a long time ago. That was my aging myself, right?
Yeah.
And so I was like, oh, my dad's going to love me if I get A's. Like, it was kind of a thought that I had. And so I would work so hard. I stars on top of my report card, honor roll every single, quarter. Cause it was my, like, if I'm smart, then he'll love me kind of thing. Do you know what I mean? So I thought it was the currency, and I got a lot of praise by teachers and aunts and uncles. Oh, Frankie, you're so smart. Frankie, you're so smart. So I used it for a long time thinking it was the currency, and it ended up not really being the currency, right? Like love is the currency. It's like love and connection.
Yeah, the actual currency.
The actual
the hardest currency for most families.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
So talk me through, because like in your memoir, it goes through the whole process of like, I want to go back to the title actually, so everyone knows it from the beginning. It's To Be Loved, a story of truth, trauma, and transformation.
Yeah.
And can you kind of give us the timeline? I mean, I have so many more questions, but I want to just start with the general timeline that you take us through in the book, and then we'll dive on in.
Yeah, it was interesting, like as an academic trauma expert, like when the publisher was like, "Hey, we want you to write a memoir," I thought that was kind of crazy. Like, why would I write a memoir? Like me? Like really? It didn't make any sense to me. But they're like, "Frank, you always share your trauma history with everybody you talk to in your workshops, and we think you have a lot to share around helping people learn that healing's possible." So it was like really their suggestion. I was like, oh, okay, like that I can do. Like I can share my story to help people heal. Like it made sense to me. And then I started, it was weird. I was like, I know the opening line. And they're like, what? You weren't even, yesterday you weren't going to write a memoir. Now you have the opening line, right? It was kind of like that. But it was, I knew it was like, you're not going to school today. Frankie, you're not going to school today. Because that is really where my life started from my memory. Because what ended up happening is that I went for psych testing.
Yeah. Because
I got caught playing with my cousin's Barbie playhouse in her basement, right? Back in the day. Yeah. And so my parents sent me to therapy, kind of sent me for psych testing. And then I spent 6 years in therapy once a week from first grade all the way through sixth grade. Right. And they were well intended because they wanted me to be a normal boy. I didn't know that it was really kind of a form of conversion therapy. And I was taught from a very early age how to be a boy, how to act like a normal boy, what kind of toys to play with that normal boys play baseball. And from a very early age, I got a very strong message, like who you are isn't okay. And you need to be somebody else if you're going to be loved, right? So I really spent most of my childhood all the way through, honestly, a long time through college, like doing what I was supposed to do, being normal in the hopes that people would love me. That's how it starts. And then it ends up being an interesting story when you marry a woman and you go drive to get to Harvard and all kinds of crazy stuff. I didn't come out until I was 32 years of age, so I spent a lot of years living an inauthentic life. Do you know what I mean? And it was weird to kind of marry a woman, be so inauthentic, and then I became my father, like controlling and kind of verbally abusive to my then wife, who was passive and accommodating like my mother. I just recreated my whole, parental childhood with her. Then I came out and then flipped. Like I found this abusive guy and I was passive and accommodating, did that side of things. I was like, God, I am never going to get it right here. You know what I mean? And then finally, I did enough work on myself to kind of not choose a partner based on my wounding. Right? Was at that point, I was like, I wasn't choosing from a place of redemption of my childhood wounding.
Don't you think we should get like trophies for that when we do that? Some type of like success marker, like congratulations, you've chosen outside of your wounding vortex.
Well, you know what? I can remember the moment so vividly. It was like the moment when I'm with my current husband. We're like together now for 25 years this May, right? So I was like, oh, I don't know this. Like, this is not familiar to me. Like it was a moment that I was like, I don't recognize this. And it was like, I know now in retrospect, it was the moment I was like, I'm not repeating anything. Like he was not familiar in that dysfunctional way, right? Oh, I know this story, right? He's going to be a better version, right?
Yeah.
No, it was very clear to me. It was like, oh, what? It was foreign territory. And so I wasn't reenacting anything from my history. You know, it took me a long time to get there. But I did get there, which was great.
Congratulations. That's not an
Thank
easy,
you.
this is not an easy happening, just to normalize it for the rest of us humans on the path.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it is not easy. That's exactly right. Most of us do a lot of repeating. That's why there's a 50% divorce rate.
Yeah.
We keep trying, right?
I want to take a moment to give a loud shout out to the Embod Lab, which is one of the most incredible resources for body-based and somatic therapies. This show is all about healing, and the Embod Lab does exactly that. Whether you're on your own journey of transformation and discovery, or enhancing your skill sets in your career as like a coach or a therapist, a body worker, or really any career where you are supporting other gently used humans, the Embod Lab is your place for deep, inspiring, and impactful workshops, certificates, masterclasses, and an incredible community of like-minded folks. I love the Embod Lab, and so do so many other people that call it a platform to come home to over and over again. The Embod Lab is giving my listeners an exclusive offer, a one-time 10% off code to enhance your embodied well-being. All you have to do is go to theembodylab.com and use the code GentlyUse10 at checkout. Why for you do we keep repeating the same familiar patterns? Because we say either it's them or we're not going to do that again.
Yeah.
And we do some version of it again.
You know, what I talk about is this, Scott. I think I think attraction is wound redemption.
I call that the trauma tingles. I'm here for that.
Trauma tingles, did you say?
The trauma tingles, yeah.
Exactly. Because I don't think we choose people consciously. I think our wounds are what attraction is. So we find somebody who we resonate with unconsciously. Oh, you are insecure like I am. It's not conscious. We're drawn to whatever, right? But it's like, oh, you get it. Because you have the same wounding. I think we feel it unconsciously, even though we attract, like opposites attract. I'm an extrovert, my husband's an introvert. So it looks as if we're finding something new and different, but unconsciously, I think attraction is we have similar wounds and we make this unconscious agreement that we're going to fix each other's. I'll heal yours if you heal mine. Right. And then that's what people do. That's why we are on rinse and repeat over and over again. Right. Is because I think we keep trying. It's not like we're trying to fix a problem. It's just not the right way to fix it. Right. Yeah. So the intention is good. Every time we're repeating, we're trying to fix it. But I say, look inside, fix it yourself. Don't ask somebody else to fix it because they'll fail.
Yeah.
100% of the time.
That said something like you can't fix a problem with another problem or something like that. And it's true. It's like,
and it's a setup. If you want somebody else, an adult, to be the father or mother you never had who loves you, they will fail because they're not your father or mother. Like it's a setup for failure. You see what I'm saying?
Oh,
so we make this agreement that is faulty from the start.
I think this is one of the things that really riles me up when I hear some of my friends and colleagues talk about a couples or attachment based therapy approach of let your partner be the parent. Like that's part of it. And I'm like, bleh. That's just like,
it drives me crazy. Yeah.
I'm like,
It
I
drives
don't
me
want to have
crazy.
sex with my parent. Okay. I just
That's
don't.
exactly right. Well, and that's why the relationships get so messed up, is because it's a blurriness of boundaries and agreement. That's exactly right. You know, it blurs the boundaries, it blurs the expectation, and it really messes things up over and over again. And like I said, I was like, I did it both ways. I became a mother. That didn't work. I became a father. That didn't work. You know what I mean? I was like, I'm running out of options here, people. Like, I don't know where else to go, you know, instead of like, do your work, like do your work.
Yeah.
I needed to heal him, that kid, so that he doesn't keep searching for someone to heal him, because when you're a kid, you do need somebody outside to help.
Yeah.
Kids need parents. So it's a natural inclination to search outside. But the reality is people will fail. So it is that U-turn, do the work, you know, that is important.
I mean, you're talking about like healing the inner child, and that's a phrase that's become more and more popular. And I think maybe we can unpack it a bit of like, where do we find this kiddo? And like, how do we start the conversation up?
That's great. Well, and you're probably young enough to not remember Terry Bradshaw. You know, like it was an old, I don't know if you remember him, like
I'm your age. I know.
Are you really? Great.
No, I just wanted someone to say.
Damn, you look better than I do at 60. You look better than I do at 60, man. It was like Terry Bradshaw was all like, they did all this hug your teddy bear, heal your inner child stuff. It was like in the 70s, and it was a little bit woo-woo and fluffy, and it wasn't real. So
that was part of like the human potential movement, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right. So there was a first pass at it a while ago that wasn't really rooted in neuroscience. It wasn't rooted in trauma treatment. So, and so some people are like weirded out by the inner child stuff, you know, because of that history. But there is this, and I do a lot of work that's called internal family systems. It's like IFS, is very popular therapy. But it is about, yes, we all have different parts of us, and some of our parts carry pain. Some of our parts carry protective purposes, like, you know, drinking, smoking, exercising, working too hard, all protections, right? Yeah. So there is the doing the internal work of, and it's literally I talk about it as self-awareness and self-connection. And I say those words slowly because our culture is anything but self-aware and self-connected. Anything but. I went to this stand-up, Colin Quinn was doing this stand-up piece from SNL at this conference I was at a couple weeks ago. He's like, people are on their phone on average 95 times a day, right? That is not self-connection or self-awareness at all, right? Yeah. So we are so disconnected. And when I have people like, stop, most of what I say in therapy now is, could you just stop for a minute and slow down? And that's the most common thing I say. Stop, slow down, go inside. What are you noticing? And they're like, blah, 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 blah. I'm like, hold on. Let's do 3 seconds now, right? It's so hard for people to stop, slow down, and actually listen to what's going on inside. Because when you do that, you learn things and you hear things, or you feel things, or you sense things, right? It's really true. It's really true. Even people in therapy, therapists, I hate to say this because I'm a part of the group, but therapists are not great at feelings, being with hard feelings.
No.
Like it's like, well, you know what I mean? Like and that's a big piece of what we need people to shift. Like, because then the reason we're not is because there's a lot of pain in there. Like it's shitty in there. What do you mean go in? I'd rather go out, right?
It's a dumpster fire. It's too hot. It's too hot.
Totally, 100%. So the thing for me is like, if you're gonna go in, learn to be with it, not in it. Because what ends up happening is people go in and they get overwhelmed and they're out of there. Give me a drink. I'm going to the gym. Where's TikTok? You know what I mean? So it's kind of like go in and be with, not in.
Yeah.
That's key to starting this process of healing.
Yeah. And so as I'm turning inwards, I'm doing that U-turn. Do I just shout out, "Hey, kiddo, come on out," or what's the best way to connect?
Usually what ends up happening is you're not going to get to your vulnerable wounding right off the bat.
Oh, okay.
That's not what's going to show up. All the people call them defenses. All your protectors are going to show up. You're stupid. Don't be such a jerk. You're never going to, all this negative self-talk, the I'm no good. If I just do the, if I just had more sex, then I'd be liked, or blah, if I'm thinner, you're going to get all the chatter first, which are all the protective parts that are keeping you away from the pain. That's what they do. I'm so depressed. My anxiety is killing me. I got to work harder so I'll get a better raise. Those are all protectors to keep us away from our pain. So you got to listen and appreciate them first and understand how they're trying to help. That's the first step.
That's hard because, yes, it is. Sometimes we're being bullied by our protective parts.
100%.
And it's like, I wouldn't stop so easily to that childhood bully that picked on me and say, like, "What's going on with you, love?"
Yeah,
but
exactly.
It requires that.
That's what it requires, 100%. And people I always use suicide as an example. Like people freak out about suicide. I'm like, don't freak out about suicide. Like it is one of our most powerful protectors.
Yeah.
And if you start gaining the capacity to tell me how suicide helps. Tell me how it's valuable.
Yeah.
Tell me why cutting is good. Yeah. Tell me why drinking is so important. Then you start hearing the real story.
Yeah.
Then you hear the real story. And so it's got to start there because you're not going to get to those vulnerable places at all. That little kid is like in Fort Knox, buried by layers and layers of concrete. And so you'll have to appreciate the concrete before you get into the wounding. And that's what people don't really understand. But that's the way to do it. It's a process. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
When you can learn, I'll give you an example with my kids.
Yeah.
I used to, my dad was physically and verbally abusive to me. And I was like, I vowed never, of course I'm not going to do that, right? Of course not. And then when I found that I was yelling at my kids, what the fuck is going on here? How could I do the very thing that was done to me, right? That was so painful. I got suicidal. That was the only time in my life, really, that I was suicidal, when I was doing what was done to me, And so I was like, and then I knew enough to listen to the suicidal part. He was like, I would rather be dead than to inflict the same pain on your kids that was inflicted upon you. Yeah. And it was very clear. And then I was like, oh my God, I get it. I agree with you. Yeah. I don't want to inflict this pain either. Then we became allies.
Yeah.
Hey, maybe there's another way to do this, but I agree with why you feel this way.
Yeah. Yeah.
You see what I mean? It's like that.
I do. I love that. And it's and for those who are listening, the we that you're referring to, Frank, is this core sense of self in this part. Yeah.
Yes.
And
100%.
I think for some folks who haven't been exposed to IFS or parts work,
Yeah.
they might go,
Yeah.
who's
Yeah.
he talking to? Like,
Yes.
is that normal? Conversation with, I think there's this like the movie Hollywood version of DID, of dissociative identity disorder, or
Guess what it is?
multiple.
It's coming out in June. It's Inside
What's
Out
coming
2.
out in June?
Inside Out 2.
Oh.
Pixar. Remember the movie Inside Out?
Yeah, I cried on the plane to it.
Exactly. Well,
Yeah.
I'm friends with some folks over there. I talked to Jonathan, a friend of mine. Inside Out 2 is coming out in June. They're doing this another version. Riley's a teenager. She's getting 4 new emotions, right? And it's the whole thing around that's what we're talking about. Like people can relate to that. Like, do you have a part of you that's sad? Do you have a part of you that gets pissed? Do you have a part of you that is anxious? Well, it's kind of, it doesn't have to be too weird when you think of it like that. And like, it's like I said before, like, I'm not smart. A part of me is smart and use that to get love. It's like, oh, okay, that makes sense. Right? When I learned what the purpose of smart was, like why was smart so important? It was like, oh, because I thought that was a way to get loved. Oh, okay, I get it. So it is listening.
Yeah. What do you think that extra 4 emotion that Riley gets as a teenager?
So one of them is ennui. One of them is ennui. Disgust, and they have this French person doing that. Disgust is another one. I don't remember what the other 2 are. He told me them, but I don't remember what they were. But I remember those 2. So they're bringing Riley. Riley hits the puberty button on the control panel.
Oh goodness, that's a fun one.
Isn't that great? And then that's how the whole movie.
That neural pruning system is just a ball game.
It's a ball game, right? That's exactly right. So if you can normalize it, like there's a way to normalize it. I mean, that is one of the things that I'm doing. One of the reasons I wrote the book is like, I want to teach the general public that this is possible. Everybody can't afford therapy, and therapy isn't for everybody. And, so I want to say, look, there's ways to heal even outside of therapy, right?
Yeah.
I want people to know that.
Yeah. Have you noticed this as a kind of a trend of late, of like therapists stepping forward more and being like, this is a broken system and we're part of it?
Yeah. Well, it's good that you say that. I like to hear that more therapists are joining up with that. I think it's true. I think you're right. Like, I started this organization called the Trauma Institute.
Yeah.
And it's really like, let's integrate trauma treatment and bring it to the next generation of healers and bring it to the general public. And people are really excited about this. Like, no one model of therapy works for everybody.
Nope.
We have to integrate them all together, and we have to teach people how to heal trauma within and without of psychotherapy. And it's very well received, because I think you're right. I think people are like, this is a broken system and we have got to fix it. Right?
Yeah.
I think that's right. It's why you see in social media, like tons of all these, why have influencers like risen to this incredible degree? It's because the world needs other ways to get help. That's the way I look about it, and I know a lot of influencers have imposter syndrome. A lot of them are my friends, and they're like, I didn't go to Harvard. Like, how can I be doing this? Right. And there's all of this canceling going on with influencers. But I kind of think like we need more help here, people. Like, we need an army of people to fix this problem, especially post-pandemic.
Yeah.
Right. Truly. So I'm glad that people are stepping up and wanting to do it differently.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting, I stay on the fringes of it as much as I can, because I'm certainly very outspoken about, similar to you, I have my platform where we really say, like, trauma doesn't just happen in a therapeutic office.
No way.
Like my
No
sister, who's a school teacher, needs to
Yeah.
have an immense amount of
Yeah.
support and education around trauma-informed care, as
Yeah.
a dentist, as a parent,
Yes.
and it's like it doesn't belong to someone just because they have a degree in front of their first or behind their name.
100%. 100%. That's right.
And like there is something weird too. I will just name it, of like the influencer war around therapists. I'm
Right?
like, y'all, this is counter to what the intention of therapy is. Like, what is going on?
Yes.
Exactly
right. That's exactly right. There's, there in the psychotherapy world, there's I think about these model makers. Like a lot of these gurus have created these incredible models. There's sensory motor psychotherapy, EMDR, IFS, ABC, DEF, everybody's got their 3 letters to make a model.
Everybody's got their fucking letters.
Everybody's got their letters. And in some ways I'm like, thank you so much. Thank you for what you brought. And we have to put this together. And we have to bring it to the world now. Like that was an important phase. And now it's time to bring it to the world in a different way. Right. And guess what, people? Like I keep getting I get messages. I'm not hearing voices, but maybe I am. But I get this, like, first I got these voices like, Frank, you have to bring trauma healing to the world. I'm like, well, that's crazy. It's just me. But like, here I am doing all this unbelievable stuff that I never would have thought would have been possible. Lately, I'm hearing love, connection, and unity. Love, connection, and unity. And it just keeps, like, it's like an intrusive thought that's a good intrusive thought. And it's like, I know it's a message. It's like, Frank, you have to teach that the way we heal trauma is through love, through connection, not fighting and competing. And unity. And I kind of fought the unity thing for a while. Honestly, Scott, I was like, unity? That's a hard one. Like people are so against each other. Which side are you on? Right? Are you a coach or are you a therapist? Like, are you Democrat? Are you Republican? Are you, an ally, or are you not, anti-trans, right? So there's all of this divide, and I get chills even saying it, like, which is like affirmation for me. Like, yeah, Frank, unity. Yes, Frank, keep pushing this message of unity. It's what, I wrote in the book, really, the way I was traumatized and the way I hurt other people. I was like, this is not a poor Frankie book. This is, I had a bad trauma history. And I did some shitty things. And we all do. We've all been harmed, and we all harm. And so it was an important message to get out to the world. We're not going to fix it if we keep othering people.
I mean, I don't think it's clear enough maybe sometimes that like the trauma is fragmentation.
Yes.
On a neurobiological level, on a social level, on a system level, it is fragmentation in its purest form. And like even modalities like you mentioned, EMDR and other trauma-informed modalities, they're about bringing the fragmentation of floating emotion in time back to like somewhere it can sit in the body or a memory.
That's right.
And it's like, so we, as sort of supposedly the gatekeepers of well-being, question mark, are competing and fighting against each other in the rat race of fragmentation.
Yes. Yeah.
This is not okay.
That's right. That's right.
Sorry,
I love it.
Soapbox
and it's
moment.
getting, and it, like, we've got to shift. I do. I was initially, I will say, just to be honest, I had a little bit of like, who in the beginning, like, who are these people? Like, I've spent my whole life writing books and reading about this and being a trauma expert. Who are these people that are rising out of nowhere and have more value in culture and society than I do now? Right. Like, so initially I had that reaction, and then I get out of my own way, enough to be like, yeah, they're having a big impact because they're bringing a message that is needed. Mm-hmm. So don't fight them. Mm-hmm. Don't scrutinize them. Like, join. Yeah. And the other side, they're not the other side. They're actually humans trying to help too.
Yeah.
Are very open and receptive to working together in my experience. Like this Trauma Institute, I have an advisory board, and there's a bunch of people on there, and they're not all therapist types. And it's awesome to have people want to start working together. I do think younger people are better at collaboration than older people. I will say that. I don't know if that's really true, but it's like, look, you guys created this problem. We have to fix it. So we've got to do it together. I have a feeling like that, there's less siloing.
Well, I think part of it is, I mean, like, you're of a younger generation than a lot of the people you mentioned in terms of like Dick Schwartz and Bessel and Gabor and Peter Levine and all of these, are friends, but they're of an older generation, and they had to fight.
Yes.
And they had to fight for our allowance to be able to not to fight. And I so appreciate that. And in not having to fight, I think it gives us the space of being like, what do we do next? Oh, we get to do it together, because they each had to fight their own lane to 100%. Make the road wider for all of us to walk on.
That's right.
But they couldn't do it simultaneously.
That's right. It's true. I've been working with Dick Schwartz since 2004, and he was exiled from pop culture, from the psychology world, because of all this crazy talk about parts. Like, so he had to fight, just exactly like you're saying, Scott. He had to fight to own a piece of it. Like, hey, this is legitimate here. Listen to me, because it was a new idea. And I think you're absolutely right. They did have to do that in order to allow us to do the next piece. So we don't need to fight them. I have them on a lot of them have organizations now. So I'm partnering with all the organizations, Bessel's organization, Dick's organizations, Gabor's. They're all partners in my institute, and they're excited about it. I'm like, come on in, we'll bring it to the next generation. They're like, great. We needed to do what we needed to do, So, I'm glad that it's happening that way.
This show is also brought to you by the absolutely stunning and powerful tools of transformation that are created by Omala. Oof, even the name Omala transports you to a place of flow and vitality. These are some of my favorite products ever. They have an amazing color-changing yoga mat that responds to your temperature and presence and reflects back your posture in real time. There's this incredible smelling skin balm candle that heats up to activate all the essential oils and vitamins that your skin has been craving. I mean, look, if I could live in a giant bath of this candle, I would 100% do it. They also have these journals that lead you into profound insight, and then you get to plant those journals to create a stunning flower garden. What? I mean, if that's not deep and inventive, I don't know what is. If you're someone who desires to live a luxurious flow of life and who believes in transformative wellness, then you have to check out Omala. Omala is giving my listeners an exclusive discount to treat yourself to something that is as special as you, boo. All you have to do is go to omala.com, that's OMALA.com, and use the code DrScott10 at checkout. And a portion of every purchase goes to an incredible charity. You got this. Let's talk about forgiveness, my love. Let's do it.
Well, the reason I like to talk about forgiveness is a couple reasons.
Yeah.
One is I don't think psychotherapy spends a lot of time in this realm of forgiveness. I think we talk about healing, and I think we don't include forgiveness in it. And the only reason the only reason I'm more passionate about forgiveness now is because of what I learned organically through writing my memoir, because I had this incredible experience where my father was failing towards the end of his life. And the last 4 chapters of my book were written in real time because he was sick. I'd fly back to Chicago. I'd help take care of him. We'd have these moments, and then I'd get on the plane and I'd be crying and I'd be writing. So I wrote the last piece of his life, and I learned so much about forgiveness after healing in a way that I never knew before. And I don't think, people talk about post-traumatic growth, but they don't really define what that is.
No.
I'm like, I think it's post-healing growth, not post-traumatic growth. I think you get traumatized and you hold an experience of something harmful or violating.
Yeah.
I think you have to release what you're holding based on what happened to you. And then you can choose to repair the relationship with the person who has harmed you, if you want to or not. So I didn't expect that to be the case, and that's the separating the us and them thing, right?
Yeah.
And I learned about forgiveness by writing a memoir and having it happen real time. So it's something that you don't take forgiveness classes, and a lot of religious organizations push it prematurely. People get really activated by the word. And what I'll tell you honestly is the healing that happened between my father and I at the end of his life was so much more powerful than a lot of the years I spent in therapy. I will say that, I really will, because, and not everybody gets that opportunity. Like, I know it was a gift. It was a gift for me that he was failing and his defenses were down. And I had healed enough to be receptive to being in connection with him. Do you understand? Like, it had to be both, because he could have been old and failing, and I could have been like, fuck you, you're a monster, look what you did to me. So I could have not been open to it.
Yeah.
Or he could have been like the same person he always was and not, vulnerable. He didn't spend a lot of time in vulnerability. So for me, it was this perfect storm that allowed both of us to grow in ways that I never thought would be possible. Do you know what I mean? And to this idea of healing trauma in connection with the person who harmed you is very powerful if both parties are willing and able. So it always doesn't work that way, and I'm very aware of that. But what I ended up finding was that I was able to receive love from someone who harmed me. I took it in, and I was able to give love to someone who harmed me. And I felt both. I felt both in a way that was so freeing. That was so, like, I was like, that's what healing is. When you can get out of the trauma connection, either way, perpetrator or victim, and rise above it and connect through love on both sides. So I didn't expect that to happen. I didn't.
Yeah.
And it was such a gift for me. And honestly, there's nothing more powerful than to love somebody who harmed you.
Mm.
It's the ultimate freedom.
Mm. Mm.
Do you get that?
Yeah. There's a lot of like controversy around forgiveness.
Huge.
So like I think we might start with like, what is your definition of forgiveness? And did it change in these last, parts of your father's life?
Yeah, my definition of forgiveness was I'm not doing that. That's what the church tells me to do. Like, really, there was that, like, forgive. You're supposed to forgive. I remember being in like Sunday school. Turn the other cheek and let him slap you on the other face. And I'm like, no, that's so stupid. What do you mean? Like, I'd never understood these biblical references to like that. So forgiveness was just a concept for me that didn't make sense, that I was always kind of forced to do. The way I see forgiveness now is I do see it as a separate stage of healing. I think you need to release the trauma you carry first, and then you need to decide if you want to repair the relationship. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So it's a relational repair, and it's a choice, and it takes time. And it is letting go of the anger and the resentment, the bitterness that you feel towards someone. Mm. And here was the kicker that was really shocking for me, is that once I was able to, and this is how it went for me. I'm not saying everybody has to do it this way, but my dad said something to me. It was like the last words he said to me. And I felt love from him for the first time in my life. Wow. So I felt it. I felt the love. And it was in feeling the love that I was then able to see the humanity in him. I was like, he's a broken person. He's wounded too. I saw his little boy, is what I saw. So then I had compassion for him. And I was like, he was limited. He was trying his best. Yeah. He was just as wounded as I was. And then what ended up happening, and that was so surprising, and it helped me that he was old and frail and sickly and needed help. So it evened the playing field a little bit. But what the other surprise for me, Scott, was that I then started forgiving myself. Wow. Like, once I forgave him, then I was like, you know what, Frank? You're no different. And you've done horrible things to people. And you can apologize and say you're sorry too. And so I had this like, oh my goodness. I was just very different with my kids. I am so sorry, sweetie. I shouldn't have done that. I apologized so much easier. I didn't hold myself to an unrealistic standard anymore. I was like, my dad's human and so am I. Sometimes I'm great and sometimes I'm not so good. And it's okay for all of us. So it was so surprising to like forgiving the other enabled me to forgive me. And I was like, that's the way we're going to heal trauma systemically. Yeah. Because if we don't, we're not going to be able to rise above it within ourselves or within somebody else. So I was so surprised, I did a lot of schooling and I had a lot of years of therapy, and this was all learned experientially outside the therapy office.
Yeah. Well, I think especially when therapy is often so cognitive, and I know you had much more in that, but it's like we don't get to feel the growth of a new garden if we don't experientially plant the seeds. And a lot of therapy is just talking about the garden or talking about planting the seeds.
Yeah.
And so
it really was like taking in the love he offered. So I had to be open to it. So it takes a lot to be open to that. love, to receiving something other, love from somebody who harmed you.
Yeah.
But then it was acknowledging my fallibility and giving love back.
Yeah.
You know, so it was really, and it's relational. That's the other thing. It's relational, right?
The opposite of trauma.
The opposite of trauma, right? We healed the severing that was created as a result of his out of control behavior as a kid.
Yeah.
But I took responsibility for me too. It was like, it wasn't just him.
Yeah.
It's me too. You know what I mean? And I think most people don't hold both sides super well.
It sounded like you really unburdened yourself in that process that gave space to be more relational. Like, and I think that's the beauty of relationship is we think like, oh, it's just this, but there's so many layers of intimacy, so many like peelings of an onion of a relationship.
Well, you know what it was is just, we're talking about it right now and feeling it like the forgiving myself then let me be human and be wrong and make mistakes. Because when you're angry at somebody, you're holding them to a standard that's not realistic, but you're also holding yourself to that same standard.
Yeah.
So when I was able to be like, you were great in some ways and you were awful in others, then it kind of opened the door for me to be great and awful too.
You just get to be a human.
That's it. And it's such a relief.
Yeah. And it feels like such a relief to unpedestal, unburden yourself.
Yes.
As you do it for other people. It falls back to you in the same way that
and I think it's easier for us to do it as a therapist for our patients. That's easy. Oh my God, dude. It's harder to do it for somebody who hurt us.
Yeah.
And it's harder to do for ourselves because we're so much like I used to. Oh my God. When I told you I was suicidal around like yelling at my kids, I'm like, you know what? You teach this for a living. People pay you. You help them. You are so horrible that you can't do this all the time in your family. Do you know what I mean? I was so hard on myself.
Yeah.
Now I'm not. I'm like, I am so sorry I messed up. Like, it's such a relief to be like, I really messed up, you know, and you're right, as opposed to needing to uphold this standard that's totally unrealistic.
Yeah. I mean, of the many, many gifts you offer in your book, I say thank you. And that is just such a beauty one, too, of unpedestaling ourselves.
Yes.
And the process of unpedestaling others might help us unpedestal ourselves from the expectations.
Exactly. I would say this, undemonizing others helps us unpedestalizing ourselves.
Bumper sticker that shit, my friend.
Bumper, because it is. We're going to demonize them. We're going to hold ourselves to an unrealistic standard, and we're both stuck.
Yeah. I mean, the more we can, the more we can identify that we're all just gently used humans trying to fucking sort it out. The more we can be part of that, and again, that fragmentation of other and them, it just congeals more and more as we let that go.
More and more separateness. That's exactly right. So I'll be part of the solution. That's what I feel like. I'll be part of the solution if that's what the message can be. And, I don't feel it's my message. I feel it's weird to say this, but it's true. It's like, it's my dad's and my message. Like I'm carrying on a message for both of us because as he kind of died and transitioned, I couldn't be here without him. I couldn't be here without him. Like it was this, I think of a soul contract between him and I. It's like, look, I'll traumatize you. You experience it. You heal from it. And then we'll repair this before I die. And then you bring it to the world. It was kind of like a soul contract.
Yeah.
I feel very united with him. The cover of the book, I'll share this with you, is I love the cover, but it's so meaningful because there's all these stars in the sky, right? And I had this like spiritual reading after he died. And out of the blue, this woman's like, he's sending stars down to you from the sky. He's sending stars from the sky. And then when the artist came up with this design, I was like, shit, that's it. That's the book cover. That's the book cover. Like, and it's like, it's a story that includes both of us.
Yeah. It's beautiful. And I want to just name it again for all of us to go pick it up. To Be Loved, a story of truth, trauma, and transformation by the darling child of therapy, Dr. Frank Anderson, who I just adore too. You have done your job and you have won me over.
Thank you. Oh my God. I wonder if that should be my new tagline. Frank Anderson, the darling child of psychology. I think that's hysterical. I love it.
Frank, where can people find you and connect with you and get more of you?
Yeah. So lots of ways these days, right? One is my website always, which is frankandersonmd.com. Instagram is probably the most active for me. So it's Frank_Anderson MD. I'm on Facebook for the over 50 crowd or wherever the hell it is now. I'm also on TikTok and LinkedIn. So I'm on all the places these days, really just kind of spreading the message and spreading the word, right? Collectively together.
I love it. Thank you, Frank. And thank you for being such a darling. And thank you to all my gently used humans for tuning in. We love you, and we are sending you so much love and care.
Thank you so much.
Thanks. Thank you for listening to the Gently Used Human podcast with Dr. Scott Lyons and friends. Visit gentlyused.com for fun extras, including submitting your questions for advice from a Midwestern mom. And don't forget to spill the tea and gossip about the show with all your friends and frenemies. And you know what? Show us some love by giving us 5 stars and leaving a review in your favorite apps. This helps us connect with all the other gently used humans out there. Oh, and by the way, you look fierce today.